This one of two bonus episodes is brought to you by the following Big Dog tier members: Jackie Cannon, Penny Palmer, Teresa Christian, Judy Berner, Misty Douglas, Molly Huston, Jacqueline Cook, and Kelly Kirkpatrick. Surprise, everyone! So I decided to do this bonus episode because Donald has been waiting 19 years for this moment. So I'm going to give it to him. Donald has repeatedly asked Sheriff Stanforth to sit down and do an interview with him in front of the media so that Vernon can answer his questions, which of course Vernon would never do. Well, now is Donald's chance. He has been waiting to respond to Vernon's interview about Mackenzie's case. I will go ahead and replay episode 5, but Donald will interject with his responses. Episode 5 is brought to you by the following Big Dog tier members: Weston Keebler, Heather Gaston, Melissa Velasquez, and Vicky Gable. Are you looking to be more involved in the Dog Pound community? If so, please visit patreon.com/dogwithabone. For just $1 a month, you can help support Dog with a Bone's mission. Please visit our page to learn about the multiple tiers that will give you access to behind-the-scenes content, outtakes, documents, photos, videos, and live monthly events with me. I thank you for your continued support and consideration. Warning: this episode contains adult content and listener discretion is advised. All views and opinions expressed by Dog with a Bone guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the host or the contributors. This episode contains graphic content. Listener discretion is advised. Everyone, and welcome back to Dog with a Bone. If you have not already, please join our Dog with a Bone discussion Facebook page where you can meet other listeners and discuss the episodes as we move through the season. There will be a ton to talk about. Also, if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to Dog with a Bone on Spotify or wherever you listen so you get notified when episodes are released. We found out in the last episode, we now have 3 people in the home at the time of the fire: Marianne, Kenny, and William. I want to dig more into why Mackenzie didn't escape. According to David McCarty, who is the chief of Jeffersonville Fire Department, Mackenzie had taken his safety classes. Here's David.
I had her in fire prevention classes. She would come from the school. And about 4 or 5 of those kids, I said, now, what do I always tell you? You never, ever go back in. You call and smoke, you don't ever go back in. Well, if your favorite dog's in there, you never go back in, so she knew.
David McCarty, of course, is saying that Mackenzie was aware of how to escape a fire and that you had taken her to his classes. Is that right?
Not his classes, Washington courthouses. They used to do stuff where they would close off half of a road and they would have the water hose there, a smokehouse there, and they would do stuff for kids. And at the end of it, the kids would get a certificate. Like, they would literally put, the kids in a room. They would show the trailer with smoke. They would show the kids inside, touch the door. If it's hot, you don't open it. And Mackenzie, for 3 years, and my 2 boys all got certificates. I took them every year to Washington Courthouse to do the training that they were giving kids on in case there was a fire. So yes, did Mackenzie know if she was awake or could move, how to get out of there or at least get to where for help? Yes.
David is confirming that Mackenzie knew what to do in a fire. She understood actions that she would need to take to escape a fire and protect herself. Mackenzie had 2 windows to escape in her bedroom. She could have jumped out into John and Cheryl's barn that was close to her window. She could have hid in the closet or under the bed, but she took none of these steps. We need to uncover why someone decided to set a fire with Mackenzie in the home. To get to this answer, we need to know if Mackenzie was dead prior to the fire, and this was a cover-up for another crime. Right there, we want to clarify something. So it clarified to me, Mackenzie's window was not facing John and Cheryl's barn. There was a pole outside her window, you told me. Is that right?
Yes.
So how far away was she from John and Cheryl's barn? Is that something she could have gotten on the pole and then gotten over, or was it?
No, because I remember, and if you look in the photographs, you can really see in the photographs how far the roof is from the window of that barn roof. I mean, I understand that lady was trying to say that, Mackenzie could jump. Maybe a dog could, but the slant of the roof and stuff, I mean, yeah, like I said, my daughter could have jumped to that roof, but she wouldn't have never made it to the roof. But like everyone said, at least, maybe she broke an arm, broke her legs, but at least she'd be alive. But the thing about the pole was when my mom was taking pictures that morning after they put the fire out and stuff, when I looked at the pictures, I saw that pole. And I had brought it to my boy's attention. And I said, man, I don't know why Mackenzie didn't climb down that pole, because it's like right beside her window, like literally maybe 4 inches from the window sill. And Harrison said, Dad, we always went down that pole. We climbed down that pole almost every day, slid down that pole out her bedroom window. And Kenny caught us, got mad at us, went upstairs, and he screwed the window shut. And when I heard that, the first thing come to my mind was, okay, if Mackenzie was awake, she'd have known to go to that window, lift it up, and go down that pole. But because of the window being screwed shut, she wouldn't have been able to lift the window. But she could have maybe broke it out, anything. But if everything was normal, when I say normal, like the window wasn't screwed shut, she could have went out that window, down that pole. She did it many, many times. And it's one of those antenna poles for your antenna above your house. And that pole's always been there. And in the photograph, you can actually see that pole beside Kenny's and Mary Ann's bedroom window and Mackenzie's bedroom window, going all the way down to the ground.
So just to recap, what you're saying is that Mackenzie, if she wanted to escape, she would have to try to get out of a window that was nailed shut. Do we know how far in advance that Kenny shut those windows?
I don't know. I never found out when it was screwed shut and when they got in trouble for it. So I don't know actual details of that part.
So that's a fire hazard in and of itself, right?
Yeah, and I brought that to their attention. I literally brought that to the Detective Brown and Brian McFarland and Vernon Stanforth and the fire marshal. I said, I was told the windows were screwed shut. And I can't recall, but one of them said they was. But then again, that goes back to, okay, you screw the child's window shut, the only way of her exiting, and he didn't do just one window, he did both windows, is what my boys told me. So she had no way of getting out those windows other than breaking the glass out. That's why if you look at the pictures, the photographs, you can see on the one side that's facing the alley where her bed was, that there's barely any fire melted the siding on that side. You can still see the window frame inside the window, the X.
I'm glad we got to clear that up and provide more details on that part. I had a lot of anxiety when it was time to find out the answer to this question. But this is the next layer to dig out to determine the reason behind the fire. Before we can discuss the manner of death, we have to go back again to the beginning to understand how things unfolded once Mackenzie was brought out of the house. When I talked to Scott, the driver for EMS, he said they drove Mackenzie to the hospital located in Washington Courthouse. The medical examiner, Dr. Gay, was waiting for them to arrive. Vernon Stanforth, who is the sheriff of Fayette County, followed behind EMS to the hospital. Is it unusual for a sheriff to leave a potential crime scene and follow a victim to the hospital who was already deceased? I found this odd, and it left me wondering why. When Mackenzie was sent to the hospital, she was sent as an accidental death. Of course, this assumption altered the course of the investigation. We know that every death should be treated as a homicide until proven otherwise. When Dr. Gay received Mackenzie along with Sheriff Vernon in attendance, Dr. Gay estimated the time of death being 2:02 a.m. with the pronouncement of 2:39 a.m. On the first page of Dr. Gay's medical coroner's report, he has basic information on Mackenzie, such as her age, her address, location, and next of kin. He then has something I have not seen in previous coroner's report. There is a section labeled Social History. In this section, Dr. Gay reports that he spoke with Joy Stanforth. Who is Joy? Joy Stanforth is Vernon Stanforth's wife, the active sheriff. Joy was in charge of a program in Fayette County that provided counseling to witnesses and victims under the legal system. It was because of this program that Joy had many interactions with the kids, Marianne, Kenny, and Donald. Joy was very familiar with the ongoing custody battles. This is a conflict of interest for her to be on scene and providing statements to a coroner when she did not work for the sheriff's office. You were familiar with Joy, correct, because of the center that she ran?
Yeah, she ran the visitation center.
And the kids, Mackenzie, Harrison, Douglas, they all went there because of the custody battles that were going on in a way for Marianne to see the children. Is that right?
Well, the reason the visitation came into it was court order for both of us to go to the visitation center. I had custody of the kids. In the beginning, she was able to take the kids home for the weekend, but had to bring them back to the visitation center, and then the kids would have to be checked, make sure there was nothing wrong with them or anything when they were released back to me to take home.
So on this night, you remember Joy coming to your house?
Yes.
Okay, so Joy was there that night?
Yes, at my house. Yeah, what happened was at the place I worked, which was Tristan's Bar, I was there with Doug, the owner of the bar, and Jamie, which was my bartender. When I went back to the bar, that's when I called the Fayette County Sheriff's Office, because I just got off the phone with the mother, Marianne. And I was telling her to go into the house. You know, don't let my baby die. Get your ass. I mean, I cussed her out pretty much because I couldn't understand why she was on the phone with me than saving my child. I mean, I'm sorry to say it, but I mean, I'd rather somebody come to me and say, hey, your ex tried to save Mackenzie and they both passed, than somebody come to me and tell me she sat on a porch and watched it. I mean, do you understand what I'm saying? So that's why I was upset because, like I said, she was on the phone with me. But at that time, I called the Fayette County Sheriff's Office, and the dispatcher is the one that told me that Mackenzie was dead. And that was how he said it, too. I said, hey, I'm the father of Mackenzie. Their house is on fire down in Jeffersonville. Can you let me know what's going on? And his exact word was, Mackenzie's dead. And I collapsed on the floor, and my owner and the bartender were giving me water. And when I woke up, kind of, come out of it, when I walked outside, there was like 9 cops. Some in uniform, some not in uniform. Vernon Stanforth was standing there. And Vernon said that, hey, Mackenzie passed. And I said, I already know, your dispatcher just told me. And I started to go towards the hospital because the hospital is right across the street from where I work. And Vernon stopped me and said, you can't go over there. You're not allowed over at the hospital. You need to go home. And I said, okay. So I got in my vehicle. We went home. And I had my ex-wife with me, Kim, and I had my boys were with me too at that time. And we got to the house. I just walked in. I put the boys back to bed. They kind of already knew that I already had talked to them and told them, Mackenzie had passed away. Sat with them for a few minutes, and all of a sudden there was a knock on the door. Opened up the door. There was Joy Stanforth and Officer Bell. They came in my house. The first thing out of Joy Stanforth's mouth was, "Did you tell your kids that Mackenzie passed?" And I said, "Yes. They already know." And then my question to her was, "Hey, Joy, is Mary Ann dead?" And she said, "I don't know. I ain't been there yet." That was her exact words she said to me, was I hadn't been there yet to talk to her. So then Bell took me to the side. He talked to me and stuff. And then Joy told me and my ex-wife, Kim, let's go to the center of the front room. And we did a prayer and she left.
What makes you think that she had been to the scene already?
Her statements. Her statements that I read on the coroner's report that I found that was never filed. And now I can see why it was never filed. But her statement there when she made the statement that she talked to Mary Ann at the scene and all this made me wonder, because when you look at all the reports, like Vernon followed Mackenzie to the hospital. Okay, Mackenzie was followed by Vernon Stanforth. So I'm sitting there thinking, okay, if Vernon's already in courthouse finding me and telling me my child's dead, and his wife's at my door about 45 minutes to an hour later after I was told to go there, how didn't she already talk to Mary Ann? To me, it didn't add up to what I was finding out.
And was Joy, I understand she's a preacher. Is that why she came to you?
I'll be honest, to me, and I'm not saying this because of how I feel about anything, I felt that I was being interviewed more than I was, because it was questions. It was questions. Even after she asked me about my boys, it was, how do you feel? You just made a statement that I hated my ex-wife, but now you're asking me how I feel. And the thing of it is, you're standing in my front room and you heard me specifically ask you, did Mary Ann make it out? I was concerned. I'm not saying this in a mean way or anything. I thought, when I got off the phone with her and told her to go save my baby, don't let our baby die, don't let our daughter die, there was no hatred other than I was mad that you were on the phone with me instead of being in the house. But I still took time out and I asked, because I didn't know. Did she go in? And Mackenzie didn't make it. And I'm told Mackenzie didn't make it. But I wasn't told that Mary Ann made it or didn't make it. So for Vernon and Joy to say the things that they're saying, it's weird that I asked. That was one question I asked, is Mary Ann, did she pass too?
She came, and it was after the point that obviously Dr. Gay must have already been back at scene based on that. So you felt more like she wasn't there in a preacher role that you didn't ask for anyway, my understanding, right? You didn't ask to have a preacher show up.
No, I didn't ask for nobody to show up. I mean, I was just told my daughter's passed and gone. And when I went home, my ex-wife Kim will tell everybody, when I went home, I sat on the couch and I kept saying, this is not real. I know Mackenzie's going to come down that sidewalk and this is all just it's make-believe. I just couldn't believe it. And then boom, there's a knock on my door, and then boom, I'm being asked all these questions. It wasn't like when Joy come in my house, it wasn't like she put her arm around me and said, hey, I'm sorry, Mackenzie passed and what can we do for you? None of that. None of that was ever asked. It wasn't, what can I do for you? It was, how do you feel? Did you tell your kids? It was those kind of questions. And you don't realize that until everybody leaves, and then you think about it and you're like, what the hell just happened here? Yeah. I don't understand I didn't ask for nobody to come to my house. I didn't want nobody, you know what I'm saying, at my house anyways.
The question is, too, did Joy go to all death notifications?
I have no idea. Yeah. I have none.
That's a question that I'm throwing out there to listeners if you're aware that this is normal.
And I want people to understand, I'm not saying this is in a mean way or anything, but it's very hard. Fathers have to fight hard. If you really love your children, you have to fight very hard to get your children. Whether you get full custody of them, partial custody of them, or shared parenting, you got to fight hard.
Joy told Dr. Gay, and this is in his report, quote, 6 months prior to Mackenzie's death, they started to work things out and be able to act like adults, end quote. Dr. Gay also writes, quote, it is reported that the father hate the mother's boyfriend, Mr. Mossberger, end quote. I have not seen a medical coroner's report that includes a victim's social history before. Not only that, but this is a very subjective someone's opinion that was included. Because I had a lot of questions about this, I reached out to a coroner and asked if social history is common to include in a coroner's report. His response, quote, never. That info is investigative information unless something like a suicide where mental state might be relevant to diagnosis, end quote. I went a step further and even researched what is supposed to be included in a coroner's report. According to legalclarity.com, a coroner's primary purpose is to establish a factual basis for understanding how and why a death occurred. Nowhere have I found that says social history or quotes from civilians at a crime scene are to be included. Why did Dr. Gay feel the need to add this to his report? Joy goes further on to tell Dr. Gay, and again, this is in his report, that after Joy's discussion with Marianne, so Joy's having a conversation with the victim's mother on scene, Marianne told Joy, quote, they heard Mackenzie yelling back to them when they were yelling for her, end quote. This is the same thing Kenny told Cheryl the next day that Mackenzie was yelling for help. Remember, in the third episode, Marianne said that there were no last words. She didn't talk to Mackenzie. So how is it now at the scene Marianne is saying that Mackenzie was up and yelling back at them? Is Marianne suggesting that Mackenzie was up yelling for help and then just turned around and laid back down on her bed and didn't try to escape? Marianne says that she has never changed her story, but she has, numerous times. Dr. Gay puts this in his record, which I have said that is very, very unusual, and to use quotes from Joy, who apparently is on scene to provide these statements to Dr. Gay. They're at the scene. And Marianne is saying that Mackenzie was yelling back at them, and that is something Marianne told you as well?
Yeah. Well, she told me that she talked to her. And that's when I was like, okay, if she talked to you through the floor, window, whatever, why did you leave? I can understand Kenny leaving and going and knocking on doors or going to the fire station, but her, you're actually talking to your child. If your child's standing at that window looking at you and saying, mommy, 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 it's hot or I'm burning or whatever, no mother. I can't find a mother in this world that would say, yep, I'd walk away, say toodaloo. So that was one of the biggest things. That's when I knew she was lying. Because even mothers, I feel that don't like their kids or don't want nothing to do with their kids. If their kids are in a situation and you're standing in front of that situation, you're going to act differently. You're going to act like a mother. But that's one of the things I got upset with her with is like, your child's talking to you. Why would you leave her? Why would you leave and go and ask for shoes? Go and ask somebody to call 911. Go and it just don't make no sense. That right there tells me you're lying or you're cold-hearted. You really did there and you're cold-hearted for walking away.
So this isn't Marianne's first go-around with a fire?
No.
Tell me about the other fire that she was involved in and what she did differently.
Okay. Well, her mom and dad's house caught on fire. About, I'm going to say, maybe 6 years before her fire. And we got the phone call. I can't even remember who called us, but we got the phone call We lived right down the street. We drove down there as fast as we could. Me and her got out of that vehicle, ran. I mean, nobody stopped us, no nothing. We could see the flames at the top of the roof. And we went inside the house because Martha, William, and Jeremy were still in the house upstairs in bed. We ran straight through, and that girl did not stop. Ran straight up the steps, right in the smoke and everything. Went in and woke her sister up. Went in and woke William up, woke Jeremy up, brought them all out of the house. And still, even still, with me in there helping her, getting them out of the house, when we were in there, when we come out, and I think they said there was a bird, there was an animal in the house. She still went in to try to save that pet.
So she went in to go save a pet and her siblings, and yet
Yes.
there were no attempts to get to that window.
Nope, none. And that was one of the things I did bring up to the fire marshal, Vernon Stanforth, and Detective Brown, that her reactions. And I even went and talked to somebody, I think it was at the FBI down in Cincinnati. And I even asked them that question about that reaction. And they told me their exact words was, if you're walking down the street and you see somebody jump off a bridge into the water and they're drowning, and you immediately jump over, and you go in the water and you save them. If that occurrence happens again, you'll react, boom, the exact same way again. There's no hesitation. There's no thinking. But that's when I said, well, that don't make no sense. I said, this is what she did. And she saved her brothers and sisters, but then her own child she didn't save. She didn't even try. That's the whole thing everybody don't understand, is she didn't even try. She left completely the scene. She left it. Left her daughter, boom, bye, see ya.
And I feel like this is a very, very strong point of circumstantial evidence that past behaviors predict future, right? And so when you have a traumatic event like that and you react in a certain way, you will automatically react or hesitate in that same way again if it should happen.
When you listen to her, when she talked to me, she said her and the dog went out the garage. She saved the dog, went with her, supposedly. That's one of her stories. But then you left your child that you said you could hear talking to you.
Her past behavior would have likely said, okay, she's going in. She's going to find a way. If you're telling me when she ran into that house to save and you were with her, it was actually on fire.
The whole top of the house was on fire, and the whole front and top of it was on fire above the front door. And we went through the front door, and she went right up them steps, and you couldn't see nothing. It was black, smoke everywhere. And she ran straight up those stairs. Martha's bedroom was first. She got Martha up. When she went in, we could see the fire above Jeremy's head on the wall. And she woke up Jeremy and then went into William. The William and Jeremy bedroom are like a joined bedroom, but with a wall and a door between them. So when you went in one, you had to go through the one to get to the other bedroom. And got all three of them. Woke every one of them up and brought them out of the house.
And then went back for more. Now, when she did that, I'm assuming that you could tell she tried to help, right? She was smelling of smoke. She was breathing heavy. She was covered.
We both were. We couldn't even breathe. We were choking and everything. And if I remember right, I think Squad came, and I think they even asked us if we wanted oxygen or anything.
Interesting. Is there anything else you want to say in this about this clip with Joy and Dr. Gay?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm good.
Let's now get into Dr. Gay's report. Unfortunately, Dr. Gay is deceased, so my husband Jason will read the report for us.
Examination. Body. Examination began at 3:15 a.m. Mackenzie had on a white t-shirt with thin straps at the shoulder, tank top, teal-colored underwear, and white or light blue sock.
Mackenzie has on what appears to be a size too big underwear. She never slept with her socks on, according to Donald. More importantly, Mackenzie did not wear this type of clothing to bed. She wore what normal 8-year-old girls wear, is nightgowns past the knee. The clothing looks like what a young adult might wear to bed on a summer night. This is also different clothing than what Jamie, again, who is Marianne's brother, recalled seeing Mackenzie in when she went upstairs to bed. Jamie reports that Mackenzie was wearing her blue nightgown. When I asked Donald about the different clothing Mackenzie had on, here's what he had to say.
She didn't go to bed with just underwear. The way they found her, that is not how my daughter, I told everybody that. As soon as I saw those autopsy pictures, man, I'm not lying to you, Melissa. I looked dead at my ex-wife and I said, and I was in tears, I said, that ain't how my kid sleeps. My kid don't go to bed that way.
Another concern I have is if the house was so cold that Marianne had to have kerosene heaters going, why would Mackenzie be sleeping in a small white tank top, underwear, and socks? Mackenzie's clothes were changed in less than 2 hours from when she went to bed. This is a big part of the puzzle here that we need to talk about is that Mackenzie's clothing was changed because you told me that's not how she goes to bed.
Right.
What did she normally wear?
My daughter never showed skin. Never did. Never. I mean, and the thing of it is, if you look at all my photographs of Mackenzie with me at the house and Thanksgiving, everything, anything. I mean, even laying down with the baby, all that. My daughter was always dressed. She never showed skin. I'm that kind of a strict dad type person. When I saw the autopsy picture, that's when I saw what she had on for the first time, is when I saw the autopsy pictures. And I knew right then, I was like, that's not my kid. That's not my kid. And I'm the same. When I go to bed, I don't wear socks. I take my socks off. And Mackenzie was the same way. Never wore socks. Never wore socks. And when I saw the socks laying there and they said she had socks on, I was like, no way. That kid, I'm telling you, she didn't have no socks on. And then when I went to Downtown Photos, I had them blow up my daughter's pictures a little bigger because I wanted to look at her panties. And I said, those ain't hers. My daughter, still at 8 years old, was wearing panties that still had like characters and that kind. These were silky panties, and they were like 2 sizes too big for her. Almost looked like, I'm sorry to say it, but Marianne's underwear. That's what I said.
And when we look at her underwear, to me, the first thing I thought was, those look big on her. But second of all, I don't see her wearing those that look like it could possibly be her bigger sister, her half-sister Jennifer's underwear.
Right.
And the question is, that tank top is very short on her.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't look like something she would wear. And so when Jamie, Marianne's brother, talks to you, what did he say to you? And I'll dive into Jamie later, but in regards to the clothing, what did he say?
So what happened was we had a conversation, and he argued the conversation with me. And I said, Jamie, you told me that you were standing right there at the foyer, and as Mackenzie was going up the stairs after you guys drank a glass of tea. And he said, yeah. And I said, what did Mackenzie have on? And he said, Donald, it was a blue or gray nightgown, which I knew which one he was talking about. I knew it. I knew the guy he was talking about. And it was blue. It's blue, not gray. And he said she had a blue nightgown on, long with the little lace things around the collar and the arms. And I said, yep, I know what you're talking about. That's when I actually told him, well, that ain't how she was found. And he said, I don't know how, because that's what she had on. When she went upstairs, she had a nightgown on.
And Jamie, and we'll talk about his timeline, but what time did he say he left?
He said he left close to midnight.
So we take that timeline, and we'll break this down later, from midnight until the fire. Somehow Mackenzie's clothing got changed into something that she would never wear to bed.
Right.
Got it. Okay. Let's continue on.
Skin. Face had black soot around nose, mouth, and under the nares. The majority of the right side of the face of the skin was removed, and the underlying cherry red to pink color. The pink discoloration is also on her chest and abdomen wall. The skin underneath was cool to touch. The clothing is wet.
Let's stop here for a second. How did her clothing get wet? I had asked Ben, Aaron, and Scott in the second episode if Mackenzie's clothing were wet. They all said no.
That's a great question. I do not remember her being wet.
This is critical because her clothing somehow got wet after she was pulled out of that house. I asked Vernon how this happened when I spoke with him. He thought maybe it was the fireman who sprayed water when trying to put out the fire. We now know that this wasn't the case. Vernon was on scene. He followed her to the emergency room, was in the examination room. How come he does not know how and where her clothing got wet? He is the chain of custody of her body. The one thing I want to let everyone know is Dr. Gay's report. He put the clothing is wet in parentheses, which is a very odd thing, I think, to do when everything else is not in parentheses. So, Donald, what do you have to say about this clothing all of a sudden being wet and what you were told at the time?
So my belief on this is when I blew up those pictures I was telling you about, her autopsy pictures. And what happened was I contacted Vernon and Ryan McFarland. And I said, hey, where's my daughter's clothes? I want touch DNA done. And Ryan McFarland and Vernon Stanforth both at the same time said, we don't know where the clothes are. They're lost. I waited a week. I called again. And then they started to blame the detective and saying, well, maybe he took them. He's got them with him. You know, he was in a car accident, so we got to track down all this stuff. And I said specifically to Ryan McFarland, I said, why would he be taking evidence home with him? Why would he take it home with him? Why wouldn't he do what he has to do right there at the sheriff building? And he said, well, we can't answer that because Detective Brown's no longer here. So I said, well, we need to find the clothes. And then I got off the phone with them, and I sat there and I thought to myself, I said, man, there's something ain't right with this whole story with my kids' clothes. So I called Montgomery County Coroner's Office, and a lady answered the phone, and I said, I'm Donald Brandon, Mackenzie Taylor Brandon's father, and I'm trying to locate her clothes. And she said, can I please put you on hold? And I said, yes. Next thing I know, Ken Hartsberger comes on the phone. Ken Hartsberger tells me that's the coroner of Montgomery County. And he said, Donald, I don't know why they told you the clothes were lost, because they're not lost. They were destroyed in August. And I said, in August of what year? And he said, 2006. I said, you're telling me they destroyed my daughter's clothes 3 months after this fire? And nobody examined or nothing. And that's when he was talking about them being wet, too. So that's when I asked for all the reports, everything to be sent to me, which they was. And then when I got the photographs, I blew up the photographs because Vernon told me when he found out that I found out that the clothes were destroyed, he then, like he always does, stutters, can't answer a straight question. And his exact words was, why do you want to know about the clothing? Why are you so concerned about it? And I said, dude, look here. I said, I watched a movie called John Bonet, the story about John Bonet. And I said, there was a lawyer in the year of 1999 that came out with new DNA of all touch DNA. And they took that little girl's clothes, sent them off, boom, found touch DNA. This man, this sheriff, blew up on me immediately. Blew up on me. I can't believe you want something like that done, blah, blah, blah. You know, and he's yelling at me. And he literally came to my house to make a point about this touch DNA. So then I was like, okay, clothes are destroyed. Don't know why they got destroyed. You're saying they were wet. Vernon's saying they were wet. So I went to Downtown Photo, had them blow up pictures. I'm looking at the pictures. Vernon tried to say what he told you. Oh, maybe the fireman, water got to her. One thing I do know is my daughter had a lot of soot on her, black, soot on her body. And I noticed in different photographs as they were taking pictures of my daughter on the table, they moved her hair. Her hair flipped one way or flipped the other way. And you can see the little swirls where her hair laid against her skin that the heat didn't get to. And you can see those little swirls. So I asked the fireman straight up. I was like, hey, got a question. If somebody's covered in soot and you throw water on them or a fire hose, water drips on them, wouldn't that leave water trails on that body, going, washing off the soot, washing through the soot? Oh, yeah, would leave all kinds of water trails. So I got back on and looked at the photographs. No water trails. No water trails whatsoever. Clothes are wet, but not my daughter. That's when I said, something ain't making sense here. The clothes are wet, but my daughter's not wet. No water touched her actual body.
So what happened was when Mackenzie got to Dr. Gay and Vernon at Washington Courthouse, he notes that her clothing is wet. When I talked to Montgomery County, when I talked to Kent, he said that the clothings were already put into a bag, and that's how they became moldy. My question is, who asked to have the clothes destroyed? How did that come about?
So when I asked Ken Harshberger about that, he said he got a phone call. He said from Dr. Gay. And my question, which I take that whole conversation so I can back everything I say. I said, so you took a phone call. That person said they're Dr. Gay. I said, I'm going to ask you a question. How did you know that was Dr. Gay on that phone? How do you know that wasn't Mike Stiegels, Vernon Stanforth, Detective Brown? Just because they say, hey, I'm such and such, and I want the clothes destroyed, we don't want them. There's supposed to be somebody's supposed to sign. So Fayette County, if they're the one requesting those clothes to be destroyed, should have signed that document that I released the clothes to be destroyed.
I don't believe that happened. Did that happen?
No, there's no document. None. It was a phone call. So that's when I got upset again, and I said, how do you know who was on the phone? I said, I can prove this. I've called when my daughter died and said, hey, I need to find out this. And certain labs and certain people started talking and telling me everything. And then they realized, oh, shit, you're the father. I ain't allowed to talk to you. And hang up. You know what I'm saying? So if I could do it, if I can call somebody and say, hey, I want this information, well, how do I know whoever called from Fayette County that was that person on that phone with Ken Harshberger? And he agreed. He didn't know exactly, like he said, I don't know if it was or not. He said he was Dr. Gay, wanted the clothes to be destroyed.
Because they were moldy and no longer of use.
Well, the reason was because they were wet and singed.
So
that was the exact words.
When you were bringing this up, because now you're starting to question and do this, Vernon's response wasn't, hey man, we had to destroy them because they were moldy and there was nothing more of value. Wouldn't that be a phone call to you to tell you that?
You would think. But I also found out from the State's Attorney General Office, which is BCI, part of BCI, that the parents of that child or that grandfather, whoever is legal custodian, is supposed to be notified first and ask if you want the clothes or don't want the clothes. They're not to just destroy them. And that phone call never came. Right. And I had custody of Mackenzie. So that phone call never came. But also what was suspicious to me is the clothes got wet between Fayette County and Montgomery County in that trip there. And the person that first stated the clothes were wet, and now I found out it was in parentheses, which now I'm thinking on that too. Why would that be? It's almost like you want somebody to notice I said wet clothes. That's what I'm getting out of it when you made that statement about it was in parentheses. That tells me, but then
Donald, you know what that tells me? That tells me that it's an afterthought. I better put the clothing's wet because it's somehow now they are wet.
Right.
They didn't come in wet. He didn't say clothing that was wet. It wasn't part of his story or his narrative. It was at the very end, in parentheses, clothing is wet, which to me is an afterthought. I better put that in there now. But I would think if you're doing a report, you would say clothing wet. It would be part of your narrative. So to me, that's an afterthought.
It would be it would be the beginning, I would feel, because you're receiving the body. You're telling how you received the body.
Yes. Right. It wouldn't be in parentheses at the end is my take. So.
Right. Okay. It's not like, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah. So Vernon was very pissed off that you were asking about this. You called him back and said, it's actually not lost, it's destroyed, and you are the ones who called it in.
Right.
Eyes did not show any petechiae. The nares and mouth were exuding a greenish to clear mucus discharge.
This means that they were looking for signs of strangulation.
Abdomen. Abdomen showed no abnormality. The pelvis is the same. The genitalia were appropriate for her age, without any signs of trauma. Final remarks. Due to the estranged social situation of the mother and father, it would be best for Mackenzie to have an autopsy done. Ruling, likely carbon monoxide poisoning secondary to house fire. Manner of death, pending autopsy, likely accident.
After the examination, Dr. Gay sent Mackenzie to Montgomery County Coroner's office using Morrow Funeral Home for transport. It's at this point, after the examination, that Dr. Gay went to the crime scene. According to his own report, he arrived at 4:30 a.m. The state fire marshal advised Dr. Gay that it was too dangerous to enter the structure. Dr. Gay spent time getting reports from the firefighters. Dr. Gay documents that Fireman Harper told him upon arriving on the scene that Marianne was standing on the front porch of the neighbor's house. Harper also confirmed that Marianne's truck was outside and running when they arrived. We also find out how Mackenzie was laying in bed. When I spoke to Ben, he couldn't remember if she was laying face up or face down. In Dr. Gay's report, Ben says he knew that she was on her stomach due to her right foot position. Ben said that he had pulled her towards him and felt like her body was underneath something, but he wasn't sure what that could have been. Before we move on to the Montgomery County Coroner's report, I want to again bring it back to why was Mackenzie sent to Dr. Gay at the hospital in the first place as an accident? Why didn't Dr. Gay go to the scene first, pronounce, and then make a decision as to where her body should go based on the information at the scene? It sounds like they just assumed this was an accident from the jump. So let's review the autopsy report conducted by Dr. Harshberger, who is an MD, a forensic pathologist for Montgomery County. Dr. Harshberger's report is 5 pages long, so I'm just going to pull out the important parts we need to know. The respiratory system. Dr. Harshberger notes the upper and lower airways contained soot. In layman terms, this means there was fluid buildup in the lungs. The fluid mixes with air in the lungs during coughing, leading to that white, frothy texture. Digestive system. The colon contained formed stool. The anus and back were unremarkable. Dr. Harshberger also notes the external genitalia are those of a normal female child. The urinary bladder contained about 5 milliliters of urine. In the final pages, he lays out the facts based on his autopsy. He says the cause of death was inhalation of products of combustion due to soot in the lower bronchia and trachea. Dr. Harshberger also noted there was 68% of carbon monoxide in her system. What does that even mean? Unfortunately, it means that Mackenzie was alive at the time of the fire. Mackenzie was breathing in fumes from that fire. One of my worst fears came true, but that's not all.
I would like to talk about the carbon monoxide and the food in her system. So when I read about that she still had stool, and I think it was 5 milliliters, if I'm correct. And then I think in her urine, it was like 2 or
She
1.
it said 5
more.
milliliters of urine.
I asked about it because you're always told that when people pass, they usually release everything when they pass. And I went to the commissioners of Fayette County, and I had a meeting with them. And one of them in there, his name is Bob, and he studied science or whatever, and he was concerned about it, and he brought it to my attention. He's like, Donald, I'll tell you what, with that much urine that she had in there, that child didn't eat or drink that much, and I'm going to tell you, with what I know scientifically, that she hadn't eaten like 2 days for it not to be a lot in her. You know what I'm saying? Most people have more than that, especially urine. And the reason I questioned that was, I told you before, Mackenzie wet the bed. And Mackenzie would get up and go and wash herself off and get redressed and then go right back to bed. And I didn't understand why there was so less in her, but then why she didn't know there was a fire. Because the reason I was questioning that was Mackenzie always woke up at exactly the same time when she wet the bed.
And what time
And
was that?
that was between, and this is really weird, because she always woke up between midnight and 2 o'clock in the morning.
Now, I'm going to ask this question because people are going to wonder this. Is it possible when Mackenzie would wet the bed, which, again, there's questions as to why some people wet the bed and it's due to hormones and they just haven't developed that yet. But another sign of that is that there's abuse going on. And
Right.
we talk about her UTIs and that kind of thing.
Right.
But is it possible when she was with you and she would get up and change her clothes and wash up, what would she put back on? Would she put on a new nightgown, or is it possible that she would wear what she was
No.
found in?
She would put a nightgown. I can honestly tell you, with God as my witness, that kid never wore what she was found.
Okay.
Ever.
All right.
Even with me as her father and 2 brothers, that kid covered her skin.
And that's something important that I wanted to put out there, because that would have been a question that people might have. Was it possible she wet and so she changed, but she would put on another nightgown?
Right. And the thing of it is, for her to have the stool that she had, she didn't wet the bed that night. She didn't make it to that part.
Correct.
I can tell you that just by scientifically, Bob being that he studied this stuff, and him saying she didn't use the restroom. So she never wet the bed, but she didn't get that chance to wet the bed, is how I look at it. But it was between, like I said, she always did it between 12 and 2 o'clock in the morning. And here we got a fire that happened between 12 and 2 o'clock in the morning. And my child didn't wet the bed and wasn't even awake during it.
Mackenzie was sent to the funeral home from Montgomery County. However, things changed when Dr. Harshberger was contacted by Dr. Gay, who, remember, is now on scene, asking if a sexual assault kit was done. Dr. Harshberger said no, he didn't conduct one, as she was sent to him as an accident and showed no signs of physical trauma, as Dr. Gay also noted. Dr. Harshberger had just released Mackenzie's body to the funeral home, so he had to call them back and say, hey, can you turn around and bring her back, which they did. A sexual assault kit was then taken and Mackenzie was returned to the funeral home. I had a lot of questions regarding this whole process of the back and forth and the way decisions were made. It was on my first trip to Jeffersonville that Mary and I were able to have a sit down with Sheriff Vernon Stanforth regarding Mackenzie's homicide.
How can I help you?
Hi, I have an appointment to meet with Sheriff Stanforth. I was shocked that Vernon agreed to meet with us, as I've heard he's not been open about speaking on the case. And when he does, he is very vague. To my surprise, we sat and talked to him for 3 hours. To clean up the audio for this interview, we used artificial intelligence for Vernon's voice to reduce the background noise and so that you can hear him more clearly. Minor edits were made for clarification purposes only. The original conversation will be available to Patreon members in the Big Dog and Pooch Patrol. So let me give you a backstory on Vernon. He's been the sheriff for Fayette County for 29 years. Vernon meets us at the sheriff's store dressed in his uniform. He walks us back to his very large office and sits behind his desk. Mary and I take our seat in 2 chairs that are positioned about 7 to 10 feet away from his desk. I have to lean forward to talk and hear him. Vernon starts our conversation telling me about Mackenzie's case.
It's one of those cases I probably talk about at the least once a week, if not daily, at least I think about, because there's so many things, dynamics to it, that they complicated things. Just, it's nice to have a clean-cut TV series where you can solve a crime in 45 minutes with commercial breaks. There have been cases that have been traditional cases that bang, 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 you just back into place. And this is not traditionally one. First of all, you have a child, and having death of the child, regardless whether it's cancer, car crash, house fire, whatever, and it touches the community. It just has to. That's where we are. We're made up that way. If you're not, and you're just that whole of an individual, nothing's going to touch you, and that doesn't say much for that individual. With Mackenzie, I know you talked to Donald. A few people like Donald, and that complicates things because he's not a nice person. I'm not telling you anything I wouldn't tell you if he was sitting here. We seem to have gotten along fairly well over the years at times, and I know there's been times, for whatever reason, he was not happy and wanted things done. And of course, what complicates this is there was an ongoing domestic situation that unfortunately Mackenzie was, like most children, are torn between their parents.
What's your initial thoughts on hearing this portion?
I'm going to say like he said, if I was standing in front of him, I'd tell him to his face, you're a liar. And you're a bold-ass liar, because I'm going to tell you right now, he don't think about this case until I come to him and say something. He's too worried about his political affairs than he is my own child's death. And that it's the only unsolved child's death in Fayette County. You would think that would be the number one priority, but it's not. His political is more important. He wants to be gun-ho, high above everybody. And I would tell him to his face, and he knows I would tell him to his face, and that's why he tells me I'm not a nice guy, because I speak the truth. I don't hold nothing back, and I never will hold nothing back. Like I've always said before, if this was his child, he would be the same way. If he wouldn't be the same way, he ain't a father.
And so for him saying that you're not a nice person, I didn't understand his point in all of that. What does that have to do with Mackenzie's case?
Right, and it don't. You know what? There's a lot of people out in this world that don't like me, and I really don't care. That's their opinion. Everybody has the right to their opinion. There's people I don't like. But when it comes to a child that was murdered and raped, what's me being nice? He even put in the newspaper a few words he called me. Disgruntled father. That's what he called me. I was just a disgruntled father. He put that in the newspaper. What father wouldn't be disgruntled? When you find out that evidence was destroyed, people failed lie detector tests, and they're still walking Kentucky cornfields. I mean, like I said, well, yeah, I'm going to be disgruntled. You're not doing your job. The problem with Fayette County and the problem with Fayette County Sheriff's Office, they don't like it when somebody's smarter than they are. I didn't have to go get an education to be what I am. But when it comes to your child and you know somebody did this to your child, you would do anything as a parent to find out who, why, and when. That's their problem. It's not their child. If it was their child, it'd be different, and I can prove that. People see it all the time on the news. When somebody dies that's in the political party, or a sheriff, or a state trooper, or a cop, or a judge, man, they'll spend thousands and thousands of dollars and get the top people they can find to solve that homicide. But when it comes to us, the normal people, the so-called middle class people, we're nobody. We're absolutely nobody. And later on, I can prove that with the exhuming of my daughter, of what I'm trying to say here. And for him to keep saying he's not a nice guy, people in Fayette County don't like him, I don't care. I don't care who likes me or don't like me. My justice is my daughter.
Amen. And the thing is, he doesn't like because you questioned and you bring out things he doesn't want.
And that's another thing. I've asked him. People will say that this is a true statement from me. Even when I protest in front of the sheriff building all the time, I protested in front of that sheriff building. I had my sign with stuff wrote on my sign about the sheriff department and everything. And I've always asked that man, hey, let's do an interview live. Let's call the news people, bring them down here. Let me ask you my questions, and you give me my answers, and then I'll contradict them and say, okay, that makes sense, or no, that don't make sense, you're a dumbass. That's the thing he will never do. And he'll still today never go in front of the news people and have me question certain things about this case, because he knows it's going to make his department look like dummies. And that's the reason he don't like me. That's the reason he tells the Fayette County Sheriff deputies that he put them on a gag order. They weren't even allowed to talk to me. And he has sheriff deputies that don't care about that gag order. You know what? They look at me as I'm a father trying to find justice for my child. And those are real cops. Those are cops that care. The cop that comes up and hugs me and says, man, I understand what you're going through. And man, I hope you get justice and everything. That's a cop. Not the ones that follow his lead and say, I ain't going to talk to Donald Brandon about nothing. Then you ain't a parent. You ain't a human being. You ain't nothing. You're a zero, just like Vernon Stanforth.
I would not go as far as Vernon did here in saying that Donald is not a nice person. He is fighting for the truth of who murdered his daughter. So I asked Vernon, since he talks about Donald, what about Mary Ann? I asked him, hey, when was the last time Mary Ann has called you to get an update on her daughter's homicide? And really, her own case, since someone, again, tried to kill her and Kenny.
Well, once again, she doesn't need to.
Why?
Why would she? You're making an assumption. You're basing her behavior on somebody else's perception of... No. That's a Donald question.
Oh, no, that's my question.
No, that's a Donald question.
Okay, well, then he has the same questions I have. What? A Donald question? Wouldn't this be anyone's question? Mary and Kenny were, if you'd to believe their story of not being the ones to start this fire, someone tried to kill them. I know darn sure I'd want to know who's trying to kill me and my family. So let's skip ahead in the interview when I asked Vernon about the process of when it was decided to do a rape kit. All right, a Donald question. Donald, what do you think about that?
You know what? I'm going to tell you, if people are listening to this, that has got to be the most dumbest thing that sheriff could ever say in his whole career, is to blame it on a father and say that's a Donald question. That's every human being that has a heart, a brain, emotions. That's everybody question. The dad's always here asking you what's going on, what's going on, what's going on. The mom that supposedly somebody broke in her house and did this. I mean, that's one of the other stories that she's told. But I've always told Vernon, I've always told the fire marshal, I've told everybody, they never can answer that question. And that's the funny part. They never can answer that question. And I said, okay, Mackenzie's done. Mackenzie died. Let's put her on the back burner. But wouldn't you want to know who the hell tried to kill you? And wouldn't you be asking for protection, witness protection and everything until they find out? I mean, we're 19 years into this, and Mary Ann and Kenny's never asked for protection. They went on vacation. Boom, we put my daughter in the ground. They go on vacation. They ain't afraid of nothing. And the only reason you wouldn't ask questions is you don't want to be out there in the center of this.
Well, you wouldn't ask questions because you already know the answer.
That's right. You know the answer to who did it, why it happened, and the whole 9 yards. And for Vernon to sit there and say the mom don't need to have to, that tells me, what are you, best friends with her? I mean, honestly, when I heard this story and I heard him say that comment, well, she don't have to. Bullshit. Any cop, any detective, anybody will say, man, that mom's awful quiet. She's asking about her own kid's murder and she don't ask about nothing. She don't, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. That would be my flags. My flag would go straight up and be like, hey, man, why are you so quiet about this? Your child died.
So when she left the hospital, she was on the way to the funeral home? It was at that point that someone said, hey, we need a test for a sexual assault. So then she went to Montgomery County? Do I have that right? So what made your mind change that we should do a sexual assault when she originally was sent as an accident?
Because it was a death at that point. We didn't know we had an arson. We knew we had a fire and we had an unnatural death. Of course, we all knew that the Branhams were mad at each other all the time, just covering the bases. Not that that would have made any difference. But yet, we just knew that we needed to make sure, and we had no reason to suspect. But we also knew that we only had one opportunity to determine what happened. And that was the conversation that I'm talking about today. I said, do we know for a fact she wasn't sexually assaulted? So if this was just a little girl burning up in a fire, but we knew we had the animosity here and the accusations were going to start flying and we just needed to make sure we had that answer. So that was a conversation between Dr. Gay and I. We need to make sure that everything's done. And he said, well, of course, he was oblivious to any or all of the other issues with the family.
How did this actually go down?
Okay, so I can tell you right here again, right here, people standing in front of me. You're a liar, Vernon. So the fire marshal and Detective Brown at the scene are the ones that decided to have a sexual assault kit done on her. Vernon and Dr. Gay did not. And if you listen to how he's talking, and that's what I did, I listened to him. And you can tell he's full of shit. He is. He's full of shit. Because, let me tell you this. If it's an accident, remember he's saying it's an accident, then why would you need, and he even brought up again, the Brandons, the way they fight, and they were at each other every day. If it's an accident, why do you have to have a sexual assault kit done? Why did you have to do anything? Why did you call the fire marshal? It makes no sense. I'm telling you, I've never in my life, and I'll be honest with you, I've never in my life seen a dumb sheriff. This sheriff is dumb. And I'm calling it like I see it, and I'm calling it like I hear it. When you listen to everything he just said there, he did not make no decisions or nothing. Now, only thing I can get out of that, him and Dr. Gay, yeah, they might have discussed about the sexual assault in that little private hospital room. And that was because, and I'm going to say it, is because Vernon made a statement to the Record Herald off record to Ryan Carter that I didn't know what I was talking about when it come to the sexual assault of my daughter, that they found semen on her torso and her stomach. That is a known fact. That was a statement that was said. But it was off the record, never printed in the newspaper. And when I heard him say that statement to you, it hit me. It hit me and I was like, yeah, you probably saw the semen on her. You saw some kind of fluids on her. And that's where I believe the clothes got wet. That's what I believe. I believe my daughter, I don't care what anybody says, take the sheriff, put them out of the line to take the test, let them ask the questions. But I believe they knew what happened. They washed her right there at Fayette County, not at Montgomery County. She was washed before she left Fayette County that day.
So you're saying that it was the fire marshal who said, hey, we might want to do a sexual assault. And what did he tell you why he thought that?
Because of what he saw in the room.
What did
That's
he
what I'm
say?
saying. He didn't. He never answered what he saw because he couldn't give that information to me or let me see the photographs of Mackenzie's room. David McCarty, the fire chief, and some of the firemen said as soon as you walk through the front door, they could tell it was an arson. And that's what I'm saying. Vernon knew when he just said that this was just a fatal fire. I heard that part. Fatal fire of a child dying in a fire. That's why we didn't do this and that. He knew it was an arson. He knew it was an arson. Everybody that was at that scene stated that you could just tell things weren't right. Like a regular fire. Things were out of character. And those professionals knew that. There was stuff that they seen at the scene that made them want to do the sexual assault kit. They knew. The fire chief, David McCarty, said he knew as soon as he put one foot in the door, he said he knew it was an arson as soon as he stepped through the door. And in some of that part you hear, we know that David McCarty and Vernon Stanforth are the two that supposedly, that's out of Vernon's mouth, walked up to the mom and told her that Mackenzie had passed. So if the fire chief is with the sheriff, before he left the scene with my daughter, he already knew it was an arson. He already knew there was foul play there.
That is a huge point.
And I believe that's why he followed the body. Sorry, but I'm speaking the truth. What I know. Back to what I know.
So what you just said is a huge part of the puzzle here, is that Vernon knew before he left that scene with David McCarty that he said that something is not right and this is not an accident.
Right.
And then Vernon left.
Right.
And went to the hospital.
And Vernon was the only one. See, that's the thing. Vernon and the squad, if you look at the sheriff report, they were the only two that left that scene at the exact same time.
And so the question is, why at that point didn't they just send Mackenzie to Montgomery County if he knew that it was not an accident?
Well, one of my questions I asked Vernon, which he could never give me a straight answer, I asked him why, if you look in the report, the sheriff report, it states in there, the sheriff pronounced Mackenzie dead at the scene. It's in the whole report. But then in this statement, he said Dr. Gay pronounced her dead.
Because sheriffs can't pronounce.
Sheriffs can't pronounce. And the only reason he changed his story with you 18 years later is because I called him out on that. I did an actual YouTube video on it and said I proved that a sheriff is not allowed to pronounce anybody dead at a scene. That a coroner's the only one that can pronounce anybody dead at a scene. And when I called that out, and now here he changed his story to you and said Dr. Gay pronounced her dead at the scene. But like you said, nobody saw Dr. Gay at the scene in the back of the ambulance or anything.
We know now that this is not accurate. Dr. Gay was not oblivious to issues with the family since, again, he included social history that is never included in a coroner's report and using quotes from Joy, who is Vernon's wife, on the family dynamics.
But I said basically, we need to make sure that she has not been sexually assaulted. And this was something to cover up the sexual assault because we have a dead 8-year-old girl. And it's just under those circumstances, those are just questions you need to have answered.
So that goes back to he already knew that it was not an accident at that point.
Right. I mean, this is how I look at it. And anybody in the detective field will tell you, if it was an accident, they wouldn't even be thinking about sexual assault. But I'm saying, and then he put out in that whole statement, though, you're talking about the sexual assault. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. You're talking about the sexual assault. And he still throws in there about the Branhams. Yeah. Branhams are having a fight. Branhams are disputing. Branhams this. He don't know. He don't know what we were doing that day. He has no clue. So where does he come up with that theory when he don't even have a clue what was going on? Here's the part where Vernon can be proven a liar. And Joy Stanforth. I walked into a courtroom. I allowed my daughter to go live with her mother. If I was disputing with her and hated her, why would I let my child go live with her? There ain't no dispute there. We weren't fighting. If we were fighting, then my daughter would have been with me, not at her mom's house. Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah.
I've got custody of 3 kids. You're telling everybody, well, they were fighting all the way up until the fire. That's a lie. My daughter wouldn't have been there. If we were fighting, my kid would not have been there. I've won custody of all 3 of my children. I had my kids for 2 years. Why would I let my daughter go live there if I'm disputing with the mother and I hated the boyfriend? That makes no sense whatsoever. And if it's an accident that you put on your coroner's report, likely an accident, then what the hell are you putting on there that I hated Kenny and my daughter? That was another in parentheses on that form, was that my daughter told the judge that she wanted to live with her mother. That never happened. My kid never stood on no court and told a judge that I want to go live with my mom, I don't want to be with my dad. Never happened. And honestly, they don't put kids that young on a stand in front of parents and say, who do you want to live with? See, that's what I'm saying. All it was lies. But then again, it goes right back to the point of this. If it was an accident, Vernon and Dr. Gay, what the hell does my goddamn history got to do with anything? Why are you telling I hate somebody, my kid don't want to live with me if it's an accident? It shouldn't even been on the report.
This circles back around again to why didn't Fayette County treat this as a homicide instead of an accident? And all the tests and all the chain of custody would have been followed.
I called Ken Harshberger on that question that you asked Vernon right there about why didn't you treat this as a homicide instead of an accident? And Ken Harshberger told me that he was called by the sheriff, Vernon Stanforth, to step out of the box.
The Montgomery coroner was called and said to step out of the box? So why? Did he say why?
No, he just said that they were asked to step out of the box, and they did, and that he was sorry that they did that. They shouldn't have stepped out of the box. They should have treated it as a homicide until proven that it was an accident.
Was he asked to step out of the box regarding the DNA mess up?
No, the actual sending her there to be the autopsy.